Thank you. Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Lena Messina and I'm the Mayor of Darebin City Council and the chairperson of tonight's meeting. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's meeting, and it's good to see a diverse range of community members in the gallery today. I declare this meeting open at 6:03 p.m. Welcome. Darebin City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional owners and custodians of the land and waters we now call Darebin, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. Council pays respect to all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in Darebin. Council recognises and pays tribute to the diverse culture, resilience and heritage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the leadership of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and the right to self-determination in the spirit of mutual understanding and respect. This meeting will be open to the public in line with current health restrictions. Masks are mandatory and the number of people in the public gallery will be restricted. This meeting is being live streamed via a link on the council website so the public will be able to view the proceedings of the meeting. The meeting is also recorded and will be made available on the council website as soon as practical after the meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to set out my expectation regarding to the behaviour and the language we use to remind councillors of our obligations under the Code of Conduct. At Darebin, we pride ourselves on being progressive and contemporary council. In interest of demonstrating leadership, I have high expectations that we will be professional in our conduct and in our conduct and language we use throughout the evening and respectful in our debate. Chamber is both a workplace and public space, and we have the obligation to ensure that our working environment and public forums are safe for everyone, both emotionally as well as physically. Councillors, we have a lot to get through tonight. As always, I expect that you'll direct any questions or comments you have through me as the chair, and I'll endeavour to make sure that everyone has the opportunity, and I will make sure we stick to time. Item number 1 is membership. I would like to introduce you to Councillor Gaetano Greco as the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Emily Demetriadis, Councillor Tom Hannam, Councillor Tim Lawrence, Councillor Trent McCarthy, Councillor Suzanne Newton, Councillor Suzanne Rennie and Councillor Julie Williams. Item number 2 is apologies. I note that there are no apologies today. Item number 3, disclosures of conflicts of interest. Councillors? Would you like to make? Yep. Councillor Newton?
Yep. Through you, Member Messina, I don't have a conflict, but I'd like to make a statement. Councillors, I wish to have it noted in the minutes of this meeting that whilst I own property in the subject area of this proposed planning scheme amendment, later in the night, I do so in common with approximately 1,000 property owners, and I form the view that my interest does not exceed that of the interests held by other residents, ratepayers and electors, and I'll probably make this announcement again at the item.
Thank you, noted. Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillors, are there any further disclosures? Noted. Thank you. Item number 4, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 8th of April 2021? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Williams, second by Councillor Greco. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's passed. Thank you. Item 5, public question time. Councillors, I just would like to make a statement. Councillors and members of the gallery have received many questions regarding a notice of motion tonight that will be debated later in the chamber this evening. Our governance rules specifically prohibits questions on notice of motions, and accordingly we have endeavoured to contact questions that have been submitted online by submitters by mobile phone and replied to emails to those persons who have submitted questions. Unfortunately, those questions will be disallowed. If your question specifically relates to the notice of motion, that is the pinch points in Kramer Streets, I have to disallow your question. I'm going through the questions. Is Mr. John Villella in the gallery this evening? Thank you. Please approach the lectern, John. Just so that you know, members of the gallery, we have 30 minutes of public question time. That'll be taken from questions submitted prior to 3 o'clock today. And in relation to that, we do ask for questions from the gallery if time permits. Now, Mr. Villella, I understand you have a number of questions in relation to Kramer Street generally, and you have 2 questions, and you will be asking questions on behalf of residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And if I do stray from the script, please advise. In regards to the Kramer Street section of the Streets for the People plan, we understand the guiding principle of this project is to encourage motor vehicles to stay on the main arterial roads and to discourage them from using smaller streets as through roads such as Kramer Street and James Street, Area 1 of the plan. Will the council engage in any planning or discussions with Vic Roads to actually improve the access for motorists to main arterial roads such as Bell Street and Gilbert Road and Murray Road and Gilbert Road, which would further discourage motorists from using the smaller streets such as Kramer and James, and thereby keeping these streets safe? Is there such a...
We'll take that question on notice and get back to you, Mr.
Oh, thank you. Great. So my second question is, since February 2021, on behalf of the residents, I have asked to see an impact report or some such report that would indicate to the residents of Kramer Street West that council has considered how the measures outlined in the Streets for the People proposal will directly impact the residents and hinder their ability to function safely around their home. Can council please provide any such impact report that shows council has considered how these changes will hinder the ability for residents to function naturally and safely where they live?
Thank you, Mr. Villella, for your second question. I will direct that question over to the CEO, Ms. Sue Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. Mr. Villella, I think... so there's a general answer which is on our Your Say page. There is a quite extensive list of documents. Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, yes.
There's quite an extensive list of documents related to your question in general and the project that is the subject of a notice of motion this evening. Right. But to supplement that, I'm actually going to ask the manager of the area to give you a call tomorrow just to help direct you there, because I don't want you to have to spend a lot of time looking for information. So,
can I follow up on your... I have asked for that, and that's great to hear that's coming again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Villella.
Now, may I ask another question that was on behalf of other residents who are unable to be here tonight?
Yes, you can, yes.
Okay. So another one...
Can you please state the name
sure.
and the suburb of the person? Thank you.
The suburb? The name is Dr. Chinzia DeLuca from Preston.
Just one moment, please. Yep.
Sure.
Just one moment.
Sure. Were her questions removed?
I don't have a copy of the question, but please go ahead.
Do you mind? Okay, it was okay.
Yeah, of course,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. In regards to the Kramer Street West section of the...
No, sorry, I can't allow that question because it's specific to that particular area, so I have to disallow it.
Oh, okay. All right. Right, okay. So, can I rephrase it?
If it's specific about that area, I can't allow it.
In regards to the Streets for the People plan proposed by the council, can the council provide any documentation or evidence that demonstrates that the noise nuisance created by the plan introduced by the...
That's borderline. I think that's... I can't allow it. Yeah.
So through you, Mayor, just for the benefit, Mr. Villella,
sure.
because it is very difficult to rephrase questions in the moment in front of a crowd. So
if I get a second chance, it
well.
might be better. I suppose it's an extension of the impact report question, specific about that.
So Just generally,
Yep.
when council's doing any transport plan interventions in a general sense right across the city, you may have a particular interest, but just generally speaking, the staff alongside, from time to time, depending on the project, sometimes with the benefit of independent advice, sometimes with the benefit of internal technical advice, go through a multidisciplinary assessment for all projects to weigh up the benefits and the disbenefits and the risks and the options. So again, I think it's best if I ask my manager to give you a call tomorrow to try to get to the bottom of any information the community might like.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have one more. This is from
From a different person.
this is from Dorothy O'Riordan from Preston. I think it wasn't on the script.
No, it's not. No.
May I
Go
ask
ahead.
it,
Of course,
please?
yes.
Thank you. In relation to the Streets for the People plan, which includes an upgrade of traffic lights on the corner of Gilbert and Kramer, as shown in the plan, did the council consider, as part of this particular lighting upgrade, to create electronic signage? I think I might be going into uncharted territory.
Yeah.
That may include creating some electronic signage, such as arrows, as part of the upgrade to deter traffic through Kramer Street.
Thank you, Mr. Vella. I don't know the answer to that,
Okay.
but I'm going to ask that question to be taken on notice, but
Thank
I
you.
encourage you to stay to the debate when we discuss the notice of motion. Thank you very
But
much.
for the record, that question was appropriate?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you for your time.
attendance this evening. Just one moment. Thank you. Is Ruth Jolly in the audience, in the gallery? Please approach the lectern, Ruth.
Good evening, my name is Ruth, I live in Northcote. Thank you for your attention, Mayor, and thank you for meeting with me on Saturday. Very much appreciate your time. Terrific breakfast. As I mentioned at last month's council meeting, I am a Darebin resident and I love living here. I work from home in Darebin, I go out in Darebin, I spend my money in Darebin. I also happen to ride a bicycle in Darebin. I advocate for active transport in small ways, such as by encouraging others to ride with me to work. From all the conversations I've had with work colleagues, particularly with mothers, I've learned that one of the greatest concerns that people have about riding to work and about their children riding to school is that of safety. And so, in the interest of brevity here, what I would like to address my question to today is about the Streets for People project. I have noticed that the Streets for People project rolled out a corridor through Northcote and Thornbury, close to where I live, and the improvement in the reduction in traffic and the improvement in safety in my local area has been immense, and that has been very noticeable in the last
Sorry,
12
Ruth,
months
can
or so.
I ask you to get to the question? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
certainly.
Just so
So-
it allows everybody else enough time to ask questions also.
Certainly. So can Council please report on the safety benefits of the Streets for People project, both actual benefits for completed projects and the anticipated benefits for projects that are yet to be commenced, with particular reference to reduced traffic speeds and volumes?
Thank you for your question. Evaluation of similar road safety projects that you've asked in Darebin show that vehicle speeds have been reduced. The treatment types on Kramer Street are expected to be reduced speeds up to 25 kilometres per hour. In this area, the treatments are planned to work together to reduce rat running through traffic. On the 29th of June last year, officers recommended the treatments that Council has been preparing to start building. These recommendations included a trial road and closure to a pocket park.
Thank you, Mayor. If I have one follow-up question, can Council please confirm what the Council officers' recommendations were regarding the Preston Activity Link West project?
I don't have that in front of me. I'll take that on notice, and I'll get I think it's on our Your Say website. /People of Preston project. So that's available online from my understanding. if you would like to, or I can get an officer to call you in the morning to direct that to you, or we can email it to you overnight.
Thank you. Or if that
Thank
can
you.
be recorded as an appendix to the meeting minutes for this evening, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have Matthew Burke in the gallery this evening?
Mayor Messina, thank you for the opportunity to put my questions. My name is Matthew Burke, resident of James Street, father of 3, parent at Preston West Primary School. Question number 1, what community consultation has been undertaken since Council voted to proceed with the Preston Activity Link project? And has that consultation directly addressed issues relating to altering the designs that were approved after an exhaustive consultative process last year?
Do you have I understand you have a supplementary question. Would you like to read that out? Thank you.
My additional question, what, if any, evidence has been presented to Council to indicate that the Preston Activity Link project no longer aligns with Council's goals to improve road safety and increase sustainable transport options?
Thank you for your question, Matthew. Consultation was done between March 2019 and May 2020 before Council decided to proceed. Some people have raised concerns since then. Most issues raised recently were raised previously. The main new issues were noise and pollution. Noise like this is normal for an urban environment, and this is within required standards. Council has made some additional adjustments to the design to reduce noise further. The pinch points are expected to reduce pollution rather than increase it because lower number of cars will use these roads. In relation to your second question, in response I can advise there's no report or evidence that's been provided to Council that indicates Preston Activity Link West no longer aligns with Council goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do we have Maddie Matry in the gallery this evening? No? I'll read out a question. In January, Darebin Council held drop-in consultation sessions with local residents regarding the new Bell Station car parks, access post LXRP and car traffic movements. One outcome was Council's proposal that car traffic entering Bell Station via Garnett Street and turn left to proceed to the planned new station car park, instead of using Gertrude Street as the entry point. Has Council submitted this proposal to LXRA, and what was the outcome? The question 2 is, earlier this year, Gertrude Street residents submitted a proposal to Council for a trial period of road closure. Council responds by undertaking community consultation, even though every resident of Gertrude Street has signed a petition in support of the proposal. What was the outcome for the community? Thanks, Maddie. Council is considering the report on this matter tonight, and its next steps. Council has been advocating for the state government to consider multiple alternatives to change their current proposed design at Bell Station so the commuter parking traffic doesn't need to use local roads. In December 2020, we proposed the LXRP the option to enter via the car park via Garnett Street. So far, the LXRP has advised they are not planning to change their design. Council is considering a report on this matter tonight and its next steps. The report includes finding of community consultation, and it's publicly available on Council's website and in the Council meeting and agenda papers. I've also asked the team manager to contact you tomorrow to ensure you have all the information about the consultation process. Is Nikki Passaportis in the gallery this evening? Welcome, Nikki.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm Nikki Passaportis. I live at 16 Gertrude Street, Preston. Sorry. My question is as follows. I would like to know what steps Council has taken to gain access to the traffic and road safety data gathered from Railway Place East and its intersections with Gertrude, Adeline and Esther Streets in order to understand why the LXRP made the decision to use these small local streets as access to the Bell Station car park instead of the safer and more traffic-sensible options of either via Blanche Street to the west of the rail line or via Garnet Street.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, and your advocacy on this issue aligns with Council's advocacy position also. Council has requested the traffic and road safety data from LXRP multiple times, but has not yet received it. The LXRP has advised Council that they are not planning to change their design. Council is considering a report this evening on this matter, and will take the next steps. We'll consider the next process and the next steps then after we debate the item in the chamber. Thank you very much for your question. Is Ewan Baker in the gallery this evening? No, Mr. Baker's not. Mr. Baker's question is, will Council commit to assisting Gertrude Street residents to close the street at the end of the LXRP construction period, and will Council commit to advising LXRP that there is the plan? That is the plan. Thank you, Ewan. Tonight, Council is considering a report on this matter, and therefore I'll take your question as a comment. Is Justin Pastaportis in the... Thank you, Justin. If you please approach the lectern. Good to see you again.
My name is Justin and I'm from Preston. Good to see you again, Mayor and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to talk. I previously asked a question at the last council meeting where I proposed that the LXRP and the state government are bullies. They're bullying us. They are shoving this solution to the Bell Station precinct down our throats. If there was any doubt whether that was the case...
Justin, I have to ask for the question, sorry.
I'll get there, Mayor. Thank you.
you.
They have now told us that we don't even have jurisdiction of our own streets.
Question, sorry, Justin.
If this is indeed the case, why doesn't Council flag our intent to close the streets regardless? Why haven't we yet told the LXRP that this is the course of action Council and residents have decided to take and force them into a position where they have to explain themselves?
Thank you for your question, and I hope you stay for the debate in the chamber that addresses some of your concerns. Council is considering the report, as I said, on this matter tonight, and I know that these streets are not currently in Council's control. Any changes to the curbs would require state government approval at this particular time, based on the legal advice that have been obtained. So I hope that I encourage you to stay for the debate later on, which is the first item on the agenda. Thank you. Is Kate DeCosta's not in the gallery this evening, but I'll read her question. Traffic counters are now in Gertrude, Adeline and Esther Showers and War Street, as well as Railway Place East. There is a time when Oakover Road is closed on High Street and traffic is being detoured through our little nook. Are there any council's traffic counters? If so, what purpose? If they are LXRP counters, will Council commit to advising LXRP about the counters that have been placed here at the time that will not accurately reflect the usual traffic flow and cannot be relied upon for any traffic analysis for Gertrude Street? The counters installed by Council are not collecting data for the next 4 weeks, while LXRP is impacting the traffic in the precinct. Council is planning to gather further additional traffic data for the precinct to help advocate to the LXRP and to support the community. Then we have a question from John Nugent. Will this council update the lighting at the City Oval, thus allowing the Northern Bullants to play night football and their games can be shown on television? Floodlighting of Preston City Oval has been identified in Council's outdoor sports infrastructure framework in the program of prioritised works. The year of construction and level of floodlighting is yet to be determined and will involve discussions with the AFL Victoria on the suitable level of lighting for Preston City Oval, as well as availability for external funding opportunities.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to give you a bit of a break. There's a question from Charlotte from Northcote. Is Charlotte here? No, I'll read her question. What is Council's plan to maintain safety in public parks such as Ruby Reserve? There is no light and it can create a sense of danger when walking my dog later in the day. Thanks for the question, Charlotte. Council regularly undertakes safety audits of public spaces with Victoria Police to identify improvements that would increase perceptions of safety. This includes a range of treatments based on specific issues, such as increasing lighting and making changes to the landscape. Officers will undertake a safety audit of Ruby Reserve and identify opportunities to make this space feel safer. Thank you, Mayor.
Is Serena O'Mealy in the gallery? Good to see you again too.
Serena O'Mealy, Reservoir. I asked several questions at the 22nd of March 2021 Darebin Council meeting regarding Clements Reserve, which were taken on notice. Why haven't the questions and answers been recorded in the minutes of the following meeting, and will this be corrected on the public record?
Thank you, Serena. The responses to your questions taken on notice at the 22nd March Council meeting were not recorded in the minutes, as indicated of the next ordinary council meeting, the 8th of April 2021, due to the reduced timeframes and the matters not being finalised. The responses are included in the governance report listed in this evening's agenda. When we get to the governance report, this evening's officers, when introducing the report, will explain the rationale for the approach.
Okay. Ongoing delays in obtaining a joint valuation of 3 parcels of land within Clements Reserve continue to put the acquisition of the parkland at risk. What is the nature of the town planning advice that Darebin Council is now waiting on from Vic Roads in relation to Clements Reserve, and why has this advice suddenly been deemed necessary before a joint valuation is requested from the Valuer General?
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Ms O'Mealy, for your question. I want to acknowledge that the acquisition process has taken some time, and whilst there were delays in earlier stages, the matter is progressing as expected at this stage, given the level of complexity involved in this type of transaction. The current state of this process does not present a risk to the acquisition not proceeding. Rather, it's a prudent approach which is being taken to ensure due diligence in decision-making by both parties who are committed through joint intentions regarding the acquisition of these 3 parcels. This includes gathering of all necessary advice and information to progress the acquisition. And I just want to acknowledge, I know that this matter is of keen interest to the community, but it's also the subject of complex considerations, some of which are confidential.
I'm sorry, the question I asked was, what is the nature of the town planning advice? It's in the 6 years that this land has been under consideration for acquisition. There's never been a suggestion that any town planning advice would be needed?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So I won't go into the detail in a public forum of the nature of the advice that's being requested, but I do want to reassure you that it is my view that it's required.
Okay, thank you. The third question is, Darebin Council used to list appendices to the agenda as separate items on its website, instead of incorporating them into one enormous document. This made it much easier for the public to follow the agenda, locate the information they required, and print out only those sections of interest. Can this process be reinstated? And it's been pointed out to me by a friend that the current agenda is something like 1,000 pages long.
Thanks again for the question, Ms O'Mealy, and having some responsibility for those 1,000 pages. It is a very long document and serious considerations by council. The practice has changed due to a change in the way that we distribute agendas to councillors. Whilst I agree that the agenda is sometimes quite large, it's in a PDF format so it can be bookmarked. So I think it's actually a pretty straightforward process to identify, but I will talk to the team about whether we can streamline that process for the community to make it easier to find appendices.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you, Serena. Kirby from Preston, are you in the gallery this evening?
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Kirby from Preston, and I'm just going to read out what I had earlier. Darebin Council has declared a climate emergency in acknowledgement of the urgency of change required to reduce impacts from human-induced climate change. As part of the acknowledgement, Darebin's own Streets for People program cites transport emissions as a significant contributor to emissions within Darebin. In response, the Streets for People program was seen as an initiative that could both foster mode shift to more sustainable transport modes, while improving safety and amenity for those who move through Darebin. Accordingly, the research revealed that 44% of trips under 2 kilometres
Kirby, I need to ask for the question.
Is coming.
No, we need to get to the question. I'm sorry, Kirby. I have to give the same consideration and ask going straight to the question like I have for everybody else.
Okay. So now with COVID disrupting our travel patterns and presenting a unique opportunity to both stay local and build back better, is Council committed to the full implementation of the Streets for People program?
Thank you for your question. We'll take that on notice. Thank you. Councillors, I also note that we are at 3:13. Can I have an extension of time, please? That's moved by Councillor Rennie, seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? 30 minutes? Thank you, that's granted. I also note there was a question that was submitted by Julie O'Brien today. Julie, your question has been considered and it is against Governor's rules and will not be read out this evening. It appears to be directed at individual councillors and aimed at embarrassing council law or council laws. Accordingly, pursuant to Darebin Council's governance rules, I have disallowed it. Now we have some questions from the gallery. There is a question submitted by Christine Lennon. Unfortunately, I cannot read it. I'm not able to read it out. This question relates to the notice of motion, and I will not be. I simply want to indicate that councils have received many submissions, many emails and phone calls in relation to the notice of motion. I know myself. I went out there on Saturday. And there was a consultation process, so I want to thank everybody who's been involved in terms of submitting their acquisitions and their concerns in relation to the notice of motion at the end of this evening. Also, there is a question from Ernie Latore, and I cannot willingly read out the question. Just one moment. Yeah, it's the same. It also applies to Christine Banks from Reservoir. There's also a question from Aaron Bond from Preston. Mayors and councillors, I'm keen to understand how you are planning to work through the current issues with the proposed high density of the community, led by the deliberative panel to create the community vision for the 2041 vision. Is it appropriate that the council in effect challenges the wording so significantly as it is undermined to the work today being done by the representative group of the community? This matter will be subject of an item for urgent business tonight, and I invite you to stay later to listen to the debate. There's no other ones. Yeah, there's no other ones here. I now call on other members of the gallery who wish to speak to come forward to the lectern. Sorry, I didn't see the hand. Thank you. Can you please state your name and suburb, please?
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Madeline. I'm a Kramer Street, Preston resident. I submitted some questions, so I'll ask them, and if I'm stepping over the line, please tell me.
As long as they're not directed to the notice of motion.
Yeah, no, then I don't believe they are.
Okay.
So in regards to the Streets of the People plan, did the council consider the effect to property prices on Kramer Street?
That relates to notice of motion, so I can't allow that question.
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand that it did.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got one more. In regards to the Kramer Street West section of the Streets for the People
It's the same. Sorry, I
It's
can't
the
allow
same.
that.
Oh, really?
I have to disallow the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, thanks for anyway.
Thank you. But I encourage you to stay to listen to the debate later on.
Absolutely, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Are there any further questions from the gallery? You must have to excuse me. I've had laser eye surgery and I'm struggling with my vision at the moment, so sincere apologies. So could you put your hand up if you've got a question from the gallery? There aren't any. Thank you. I noticed that there are 4 submissions this evening in relation to a particular item. It states here that there are 4. Can I have a show of hands who has submissions this evening for council? Could you please kindly advise me would you like to make the submission now or before the item in general? Before the item. Okay, which item does that relate to? 7.1. Okay. I understand there may be others for 7.7. Are you in the gallery? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 6, petitions. Councillors, I understand there are no petitions to be tabled this evening. Is that correct? The first report we have to consider is item 7.1, Bell Station Precinct Engagement Report. So now I invite the submitters to come to the lectern. Can you please state your name, suburb?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor. My name is Mitch from Preston. Since the inception of the Preston Level Crossing Removal Project, the LXRP have hidden behind a veil of bogus community consultation and utter contempt for the local residents. These residents will be the ones who live with the ongoing positive and negative effects of LXRP's work. To an outsider's perspective, LXRP look to do the right thing. From an insider's perspective, they have total disregard for anyone's interests apart from their own. Our community has been crying out to be involved in this project so that we can deliver positive change for Preston. The LXRP have actively kept the community at arm's length and only engaged in tightly choreographed involvement. The matter before the council this evening is extremely important to the local character of our area. This is how council and councillors can show their support for our community. Opening up local heritage streets where kids play to become rat runs to the new Bell Station car park is totally inappropriate when a viable alternative exists. The community has presented the Go West option to the LXRP, Minister for Transport Infrastructure, the local members and none of them have given a coherent reason why a western entry to the car park is not possible. A western entry is a win for all. In addition to the officer's recommendations this evening, I would like Council to, number one, explore the option for immediate action that is outside LXRP's project area, including placing morning peak hour, no right-hand turn bans to southbound traffic along High Street into Gertrude, Adeline, Esther and Showers Street. From my reading of the project area map, this part of High Street is not under the Major Transport Projects Facilitation Act, and LXRP would not need to be informed of the change. Number two, I'm glad the officers have recommended council signs our Go West campaign. I'd ask council to share the video on their social media profiles. We thank council and councillors for your support and look forward to continue working with you.
Thank you, Mitch. Yes. Now, can I ask for the second submitter to approach the lectern this evening? Welcome again, Justin. You have 2 minutes for your submission.
It won't be long this time. Thank you. The Metro depot at the end of Gertrude Street is moving out this week. This yard has been the root cause of the new car park issue. I would like council to install no truck signs on Gertrude Street and Railway Place East, please, between Showers and Gertrude Street, so that these two streets join Esther and Adeline in being no truck streets. The reasoning for not doing this in the past is that the depot needed access. Furthermore, for the benefit of the forthcoming debate, please can council consider action immediately? Let us not wait any longer for the LXRP to destroy our neighbourhood any further. Thank you, Mayor and councillors.
Thank you, Justin. Can I ask officers to take their seat for any questions? Thank you, team. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers for this item, please? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Messina. I know there's been some previous discussion about the adding of no right-hand turn signs at the entrance to Adeline, Gertrude and Esther. Would it be possible to extend that to include Shower Street and Wars Avenue in principle?
Through you, Mayor, I might ask Mr Middlemass to respond.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. In principle, it would be possible to consider turn bans at those streets as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you also to our officers for this report and also to the submitters. In relation to the submissions that Council has just heard, one of the questions that was raised, or rather the challenge that was raised to Council, was to undertake works immediately. Could the officers outline what works could be undertaken immediately that may go some distance to addressing the matters raised by the submitters?
Through you, Mayor, I might ask Mr Middlemass to respond to that in the first instance. Thank you.
Ms Olivier.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. At this stage, because the area is defined by the Major Transportation Facilitation Act, there are no traffic management solutions that we can deliver without working with the Level Crossing Project team and the Head of Transport Victoria.
Thank you, Mr Middlemass. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I just want to follow up on the question about the no-turn bans into the street. I was just wondering what could be done to actually complement the no-turn bans in order to make them much more effective so that it has the desired impact.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor. In our experience using turn bans solely, the only supporting treatments that I can think of that are not within the project area would be advance warning sign that there is a turn ban coming up, and having those signs being larger so that they're clearly visible by oncoming traffic.
Just a complementary,
Have a supplementary question?
And could I ask in terms of, and I welcome the response, in terms of having early warning signals, from a compliance perspective, what additional resources could council put in order to make sure that if we were to put no turn bans, that people will actually be compliant with them?
Again, thank you for the follow-up question through you, Mayor. The enforcement of turn bans is undertaken by Victoria Police, so it's not a responsibility of Darebin Council to enforce turn bans.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, did you have a question?
Yes, Mayor Messina, I just wanted to ask the officers to better understand the proposal for 4 streets to have a no-turn ban. In terms of timing, when would those no-turn ban signs go in, and when is Oakover Road going to be freed up again? I'm sort of mainly looking at the conflict that's there at the moment.
Thank you for the question again through you, Mayor. The timing would be dependent on getting approval for the use of those signs through the Department of Transport, and we would also need to get specific legal advice on whether they're a legitimate solution, given that they would limit the access to the worksite that has been gazetted. So there's a couple of steps in the process. It could take a bit of time.
Just supplementary question.
Just a supplementary question. I do use the street quite a bit, so I was wondering how long is that part of Oakover going to be blocked? Because obviously at the moment Showers or Wars has to be used.
Thank you for the question. I'll speak a bit closer to the mic this time so you can hear clearly. Through you, Mayor. Currently the works are scheduled for the next 4 weeks, so there is expected to be a sequence of closures and diversions for the next 4 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Middlemast. Do we have, councillors, do we have a motion?
Sorry, before we go to a motion, I've got a further question.
Oh, sorry, apologies.
If I may, thank you. It's really a follow-on from the question and the response that I received. If I'm correct, the response was that council on its own cannot enact the specific works, the traffic management works, separate to the no turn ban request, without the express endorsement or agreement of the state agency. I just wanted to ask, through you, Mayor, to our officers, what is the mechanism for that agreement to be reached? How does that occur? And should council wish to pursue that?
Mr. Olivier?
Through you, Mayor, I don't have the details in front of me, but my understanding of the advice is that essentially there's a consultation process we would do with the agency, and we'd seek their consent through that. So officers would follow it up directly through our relationships with the LXRP. There are some elements of this area that we'd also need to consult with Department of Transport and some of the other state agencies. It's not a sort of very specific and prescribed process.
Thank you, Mr. Olivier. Supplementary?
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, can I confirm that the motion as it currently stands provides, and previous resolutions provides council or officers with the mechanism to pursue that those discussions and consultations? And if not, what words would facilitate that?
Sure. I understand there's an alternate motion to be presented that was circulated earlier as well. Ms. Olivier?
Through you, Mayor, the officer's recommendation in the report, yes, would give us the ability to progress anything needed towards that. If we did get consent earlier, it would allow council to proceed earlier.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Rennie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Messina. I'd like to move a motion that has an additional point 5 in addition, thank you, and that additional point 5 over and above what's in the council report that councillors have in front is that we seek state government approval to introduce no right-hand turn signs on High Street for vehicles travelling south on High Street into Adeline, Gertrude, Esther, Showers and Wars streets. So those are all the streets south of Garnet and north of Oakover.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I think it's fair to say that our community, perhaps more than any other in Melbourne, has embraced the level crossing removal plans and the fact that we are going to get elevated rail. And I would have to say at this point in time, I actually start to wonder whether that was a mistake, because when I look at communities in the southeast that vehemently opposed these kind of plans, they got listened to and they got what they wanted in terms of not having to fight for basic things such as not having local streets destroyed by being turned into car park access. I have rarely seen the state government squander such community goodwill towards a project. This community was extraordinary in their openness to working with the Level Crossing Removal Authority, to trying to improve outcomes for their streets, for their neighbourhood and for our community more generally. An open-mindedness to elevated rail that I don't believe was seen anywhere else in Melbourne. And what has the state government done to that? Smashed it back in their faces and suggested an outcome that will turn their streets into throughways for a car park. In the face of a perfectly viable and sensible solution which would see car park access from the western side of the railway line, where there is almost no residential issues and where the streets are of an absolutely different nature. So this motion is our best efforts at this point to signal very strongly that we will not tolerate this, that these streets are our local roads and that whilst they are out of our control at the moment, we anticipate that as soon as they are back in our control, we will actually commence formal processes to achieve road closures that will fully block access to the future Bell Station commuter car park from this side of the line. And further to that, we'll look to install no right-hand turn signs from High Street, because that is the traffic movement that is actually going to block up High Street as well and have much broader ramifications. We do not want cars coming down High Street, and it won't just be the 70 cars a day that will use those car parks. It will be the 70 that come after them looking for a car park that they can't find because all the car parks are taken, and driving up and down all day looking for parks that aren't there because the car parking will be inadequate. So I'm proud to be a council that has supported this initiative. I remain very keen to see this project go through, and I really call on the state government to listen to the residents in this area and to come up with the far more sensible approach, which is to see access from the western side of the train line, and in fact, even better, to move the car park to the western side of the line altogether.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and I second everything that Councillor Rennie has said. I also rise as the councillor who represents the South West Ward, which is actually, when we refer to the west, we're actually referring to that side of the train line. And I make that note because when we are thinking about the advocacy position that this council has been putting forward, which is consistent with residents that stand currently to be directly impacted by what is just a really poor piece of planning, it's actually my ward, in fact, that will be the one that would have the car park and the access to the car park, and I'm actually completely comfortable with that. And I'm, in fact, happy to champion that to my own residents in my own constituents, because at the end of the day, this is actually not about picking winners and losers. It's about doing the right thing. And the problem that we have here with this situation is that the LXRP and the state government, backed by the relevant political representatives, have picked winners and losers. And that's completely inappropriate when it comes to infrastructure like this. We actually need to have an exploration, and we need advocates within government to actually champion good planning, good policy. Good planning and good policy starts with understanding not just the immediate impacts, maintaining the project in its timeframe, building the piece of work. I think everyone that I know here supports the project, but we do not support turning residential streets into the driveways to a car park, and that is the long-term impact that will be felt by residents. Now, they may not, in their numbers, comprise the biggest voter base to change election results. They may not be enough residents in the minds of politicians and in the minds of government for anyone to act quickly. But their lives matter, their livelihoods matter, their location matters, and those things should be considered. So I'm actually, in supporting this amended recommendation, I'm also calling on everyone to really get behind what residents have been asking for, which is some common sense. That's all they're asking for, and a bit of a breath so that we can actually see that the long-term impacts are not devastating for this neighbourhood.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillors, then I put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. That's Councillor Hannan, Councillor Williams, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Dimitriadis, Councillor Messina, Councillor Newton, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Rennie, Councillor Greco. Councillors, now the next report we have to consider this evening is item number 7.2, proposed discontinuance and sale of the right-of-way road adjoining the rear of 1 to 11 Merrylands Road, 4 to 10 Hughes Parade and 12 Asquith Street in Reservoir. Wait for the officers to take a seat. And then, councillors, are there any questions regarding it? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Look, my question is in relation to our policy to sell these particular parcels of land, and I just wanted the officers to actually explain what the policy says in terms of giving residents an opportunity to have the opportunity to actually purchase those parcels of land behind their premises.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Our policy, sale of minor council property assets policy, provides for fair and equitable division of land. Failing that, we have a follow-up policy, which is a financial submission process. Obviously, council's preference is for that fair and equitable division.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any further questions to the officers? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Greco, would you like to share your motion?
Yes, I have a motion that I would like to put forward. It's a motion with a slight change to the motion that's been recommended by the officers. So if we could have that up with the part that is different, councillors, is part E, which has been highlighted there in bold on the screen. Let me read it just to make sure it's exactly as I intended it to be. Yep.
That's your... Councillors, do we have a seconder for Councillor Greco's alternate motion? Seconded by Councillor Newton. Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to the alternate motion?
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Councillors, this is one of the usual run-of-the-mill requests that we get for the discontinuance of and the sale of the right-of-ways. But in this particular situation, there's a conundrum that we have to face. And I really acknowledge the work that our officers have done in trying to balance, if you like, a pragmatic approach that would favour council as against another approach which is more principle-based in terms of ensuring equity in relation to our residents having an opportunity to have a say in purchasing the land that is deemed to be ceased to be a road. We've had 4 written submissions in relation to this particular issue, and 2 actually presented to council at a hearings of submission meeting. The majority of residents want basically accept the idea that the land should be discontinued, and as a result of that, given the opportunity for people to purchase it. But where the problem is at the moment is that what the previous council recommendation was, as per the officer's report, was to offer it only to one particular resident, and therefore, as a result of that, denying other residents the opportunity to purchase that particular land. The reasons why it's been offered up to one particular resident is has been outlined in the report, and as the report says, there could be the case that particular resident could make an adverse possession claim, which may be successful with the titles office. And on the basis of that, council is suggesting that the land be offered to that person so that we could get some income from it, as against not offering it to that person and offering it to whoever wants to purchase that land. And as a result of that, the council could run the risk that the land could be adversely possessed. For me, councillors, there's a fundamental principle here. We should be treating all residents as equal in these particular instances here. That's what our policy dictates, and I think that will be the best opportunity. Also, it doesn't deny the opportunity for the resident that has occupied that land, in inverted commas, to actually test that with the titles office. They're more than welcome to go and do that, and that's their legal right to do that. And at the same time, I think that council owes it to the broader community in that area, and that the land is made available for sale to them should they wish to purchase it.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do support Councillor Greco on this one. This seems to happen quite a bit across municipality, particularly in Reservoir, where people have used bits of the land at the end of their block for many, many years. I think in this case, somewhere around 40 years. It happens all over the place, and these sort of motions do try to fix up some of those just historical things that have been like that. I do support this because I was at the hearing of submissions committee, heard from the owners who also want the possibility of having the chance to purchase this land, and I really agree with Councillor Greco that even though the people who are using it now have used it for a long time, it doesn't actually make it theirs, and I think the option for all parties to have a fair chance to purchase it should be done. So very happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I'm actually going to speak against this motion. And I do so because of the laws of adverse possession. So adverse possession is a property law principle that allows a person to claim ownership of land without paying for it. Adverse possession occurs where a person has enjoyed uninterrupted and exclusive possession of land for a period of 15 years. And under Section 60 of the Transfer of Land Act, adverse possession can be the basis for a claim to title by possession. It's pretty clear to us, it's also extremely clear to the owner, that 15 years is well and truly past in this case. And this is not actually such an unusual principle, and it's one that exists not just in Australia but in other countries. If I go out to the back lane and I find an old jacket that's been left lying there, and it's a very nice old jacket with quite some value, but I bring it into my house and I clean it and I darn it and I wear it for the next 20 years, challenge anyone to come and tell me that they can have it back or that it belongs to anyone else. It's the same kind of principle with adverse possession. I think the Mayor's laughing because she knows that's probably exactly the type of thing I would do.
I'm laughing.
So, you know, if someone looks after the land for 20, 30, or in this case, possibly 40 years, they mow it, they grow vegetables on it, they concrete over it, and no one challenges them. And that's the important part. Adverse possession doesn't exist if someone actually asserts their right. But for decades, it would appear that council has not asserted their right to the land, and therefore I think it is highly likely that these people might be successful, and I think that would set a precedent that this council might do well to avoid. And I think in many ways, the people who have occupied that land are being quite generous by expressing their willingness to buy land that they might be able to go to court and get for free. And for that reason, I'm voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Sorry?
I'm just gobsmacked with my previous councillor making such a statement. I mean, I look at about Indigenous people and white man, we've come on their land and we try and do the same thing to Indigenous people, that we say we own this land when we don't. And you're saying virtually the same thing about what this owner's doing.
I'm going to actually raise a point of order because I think that it's an inappropriate and somewhat offensive comparison.
Noted. Please withdraw your comments, Councillor Williams.
I'm happy to withdraw my comments.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers? Councillors, let's put that to the vote. Or, you have a right of reply? Yep.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Just in relation to the points that were raised by Councillor Rennie, the motion that we're considering tonight does not actually question the adverse possession provisions. That's an act that exists in the Victorian Parliament, and that is separate to council. What we have to be careful of, councillors, is that we do not become the arbiters of whether adverse possession exists here or not. That's not our remit as a council. That is something that is considered by the Titles Office. And what we should do is allow that process to play itself through. If the particular resident wants to claim adverse possession, we should not also, councillors, because of the inaction in past years, distant past years, of this council, in not ensuring that that property at the back was adversely possessed, we should not, as a result of that, then deny the opportunity to other residents in our city the right to actually put in a bid to buy that land. It's because of our inaction as a council in the distant past of not ensuring that that land would be possibly could be adverse possessed. We should not then pass that consequence onto other residents and deny them the opportunity and the right to actually purchase that land. So I say, therefore, in response to the Councillor Rennie's objection to my motion, is that let the process play through, both with the Titles Office in relation to adverse possession, and let's ensure that our residents get equitable treatment.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Do we have any further? No, we don't, because there's a right of reply. Pardon. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried by Councillor Hannan, Councillor Williams, Councillor Dimitriadis, Councillor Messina, Councillor Newton, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Greco. All those against? Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Rennie. That motion has been carried. Councillors, the next item report to consider is item number 7.3, proposed road declaration rear of 137 to 143 Station Street, 100 to 104 Arthur Street and adjoining to Duncan Street, Fairfield. The officers are seated at the table. Do we have any questions to the officers? As there are no questions, councillors, do we have a motion?
Mayor, I'd like to defer this item on the agenda.
So your motion is to defer the item on the agenda to the next council report, or to a briefing, or just to adjourn? Defer it?
To a briefing.
To a briefing and then a council report? So just defer the matter?
Through you, Mayor, I suggest
no date.
It should be the subject of a briefing, so I would suggest defer to June.
To June. Okay, great. Do we have any seconded by Councillor Lawrence? Would you like to speak to the motion, or just put that straight to the vote?
Yeah, we'll just put it straight to the vote for now.
All those in favour? That's supported by Councillor Hannan, Councillor Williams, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Dimitriadis, Councillor Messina, Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Rennie and Councillor Greco. All those against? Councillor Newton. That item has been carried. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is 7.4, the naming rights of the multi-sports stadium. Do we have any questions to the officers? As there are no questions, do we have a motion? Councillor Rennie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Messina. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Lawrence. Would you like to... Oh, I thought you put your hand up. Okay, I'm really...
I think Councillor Dimitriadis would like to second it.
Sorry, I did see your hand. Sorry. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Messina. I think this is the culmination of an incredibly exciting project and an exciting process that we've been undertaking. So the multi-sport stadium has been a decade in the making, and I'm sure Councillor McCarthy could speak to some of the process and how deeply valued and desired this venue is, particularly as a measure to address gender equity in our municipality. And we then came to the process of thinking, well, what will we call this new stadium? And that's a very important decision because this is a legacy piece, I suppose, and we have for many years now had a position that it would be great to see more place names, more locations of importance in our municipality named in Woiwurrung language, which is the language of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of this land. And so in this case, we went to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Land Heritage Corporation and asked for them to give us some names which they thought would be fitting of a new venue of this type, with a focus on gender equity and on women's participation in sport. And they have presented us with 3 names, which we then took out to community consultation. And I'm delighted that our community has told us that of these names, Nurrunjeri Stadium is the stadium, the name that they think is most fitting. I think it's a beautiful name. I think it will become part of a way in which we as a community familiarise ourselves with this beautiful language, Woiwurrung, a way in which we start to understand that we are connected to a place which is important, a place where people lived, thrived and worked and had community well before any of us arrived. And so Nurrunjeri Stadium, I think, heralds the beginning of what I think will be a great movement in our city, actually, towards the renaming of many significant locations of importance. And, it has a meaning, strong women, if I'm not mistaken, and I should have just double-checked that, which also speaks to our desire to see gender equity and the strong women, the strong place and tradition of Aboriginal women in our community who demonstrate such strength and resilience. So I'm delighted that we're here at this point. I'm looking forward to a special ceremony, actually, to open Nurrunjeri Stadium, and I believe that could even be as soon as the end of this year, which is very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Just for the purpose of the debate, it actually means women leader.
Thank you, Mayor Messina.
Councillor Dimitriadis.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise today to second the officer's recommendation regarding the name of the new multi-sport stadium. I would like to begin by thanking the Wurundjeri Council and the Wurundjeri Elders, who are the traditional owners of the land on which Darebin stand today, for taking the time to participate and engage with Council in regards to the naming of the new multi-sport stadium located in the South East Ward, and for sharing the Wurundjeri language with all of us. Thank you to all the residents of Darebin who completed the survey for the naming process. It is great to see the community engage with the naming of our key new infrastructure projects and the overwhelming positive response to this process. And finally, thank you to our council officers for your work in this process. Darebin has a proud commitment of naming at least 50% of new public spaces with words chosen in collaboration with the Wurundjeri Council. I welcome the chosen name Nurrunjeri Stadium, meaning women leader, as the Mayor stated, in the Wurundjeri language, and I'm proud to put this forward in the next step of the process for naming the multi-sport stadium at John Cain Memorial Park in Thornbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dimitriadis. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I really support the comments of the previous 2 councillors, the mover and seconder. And I want to say how fitting it is to have a stadium named Woman Leader, because not only does it recognise something which we should and must do more of as a society, and particularly in a place like Darebin, and obviously in close connection, in close solidarity with the traditional owners, Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, but also to recognise that the foundation of this project is actually in women's leadership. It was a local woman by the name of Christine Johns, who brought together other women and girls in the community for the need for this particular facility. And it was the recognition that girls and women in our community were forced to have to leave this community to access, in this case, netball and basketball and other activities outside of the area because we simply didn't have the infrastructure provided. So at the very foundation of this project, it has been women's leadership. It was women's leadership that brought together a petition of over 1,000 local netball players and their families. And it was in women's leadership that we saw the groundswell of community support for this project. And so it is fitting that not only do we recognise in this name the traditional owners and in their language, but also we recognise that this project is all about that exact notion of women's leadership. And I'm enormously proud that we're here today. And I do hope in the motion as listed, it does talk about a comprehensive communication and engagement plan to ensure that the community is well informed about the next steps in the naming process. But I also hope that Council reaches back to those people who made the submission, brought together the petition, and I think will be overwhelmingly delighted by this name selection because it is so in keeping with what they were about.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina, I'm delighted to speak in support of this motion and for it to finally be here. It's obviously the infrastructure itself fills in a gap that's been there for high ball sports for 30 years and been lacking. But it's particularly meaningful that we have collaborated with the traditional owners and the elders and come up with a name that we've then tested with the community that reflects a culture, the oldest living culture on the planet. And it's almost normal in Darebin that this would just happen, but we should just remind ourselves that this doesn't happen by accident. It happens through lots of work and engagement. And it reconnects us all to an older culture that was running between these two creeks where Darebin mainly falls. I don't want to cast doubt on other councils, but there are other councils that have trusted consultants and gone for gimmicky names for stadiums. And I think I'm very proud and pleased that we've done this smoothly with great inclusion and walked in partnership with the First Nations people to get a name for an excellent project.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further? Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you. I'm very pleased to hear the name because I think it's a wonderful, fitting name for such a beautiful stadium that will be that's been erected. But I also would like to say a big thank you to Fiona Richardson, who's no longer with us, and she was actually a huge key advocate for the MSS, and I hope that we can also honour her maybe in the future, whether it be the side street or one of the stadium rooms or club rooms or something also, because I think it's only fitting that those all who have been involved in this also get recognised.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I also like to say a few words in relation to this. I really welcome the naming of the multi-sport stadium and the way that it's been done. Without going into the merits, obviously, of the sports stadium themselves, I really want to emphasise the point about the process that we went through in naming and this sports stadium, using the traditional owners as a reference point and using their language as a reference point. Because I think that in the naming process, it creates a greater level of consciousness in our community about who are the custodians of this land and who have been the traditional owners of this land. So going through that process provides a strong point of recognition and also opens up a dialogue between the community with the Indigenous owners of the land. And I think it'd be good if we can continue this process because it's a part of that awareness raising process that we need to go through, because I'm old enough to know that I wasn't taught a proper Australian history, and this actually then gives as a pointer to what the Australian history is. The final point I would make is that whilst naming particular infrastructure is really good, I think hoping that in the future we can actually go one step further rather than just naming infrastructure and areas of Darebin, that where we consider actually giving up some of Darebin's land back to the traditional owners and for them to actually take possession of. And I look forward for that day soon.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? As there are no further speakers, councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimously supported. Thank you, councillors. I look forward to entry on that day. Councillors, the next report for consideration is item number 7.5, the Darebin Creek Management Committee Memorandum of Understanding. I invite officers to the table, and councillors, do you have any questions to the officers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Member Senator. I just had a question because I understand that the Mary Creek Management Committee have a similar memorandum of understanding, and I was just wondering the process that we're going through with the Darebin Creek Memorandum of Understanding, whether that is consistent in terms of its duration, its time and its content to the Mary Creek Management Committee.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor. They're not exactly the same. The agreements with each committee are slightly different. Darebin Creek Management Committee at the moment is working on a strategic plan, so we're sort of between MOUs with them at the moment, but we do have an active MOU with the MCMC.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question?
I have a supplementary question. I understand from the report that if we were to endorse it tonight, that there will be a conversation with the Darebin Creek Management Committee, and if there are changes suggested by the Darebin Creek Management Committee, would that need to come back to council for re-ratification or not?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor. The conversation with the DCMC has been ongoing for some time. For the same reason I mentioned before, they're working through some strategic work at the moment, so we're trying to reach an agreement with them. It wouldn't be necessary to come back to council after negotiation for a one-year agreement, is our understanding, because that can be signed under CEO delegation, but if it was to be longer, it would come back to council, yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Dimitriadis?
Yes, I'd like to move the motion, the recommendation. Yep.
Do I have a seconder for the officers? Moved by Councillor Lawrence. Would you like to speak to... Seconded by Councillor Lawrence, apologies. Would you like to speak to the...
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Firstly, thank you to the officers for quickly developing this report and the draft memorandum of understanding between Darebin Creek Management Committee and Council, as well as working with DCMC, Banyule Council, and for future work in the consultation process. The last memorandum of understanding for DCMC expired last year on the 30th of June 2020, despite DCMC continuing to have an MOU with Banyule Council. So DCMC does significant work along Darebin Creek and have a very long and ongoing relationship with Darebin Council to help support them in their very important work. I look forward to this draft going to DCMC for negotiation, and I hope councillors will support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina, just briefly, there's a lot of incredible work that's happened along Darebin Creek with Darebin Creek Management Committee and also through the Darebin Parklands Association. And more recently, there's more activism around the upper northern part of the Darebin Creek. So I think this is really timely. The council recommits to a relationship with Darebin Creek Management Committee. And I also notice from our recent interactions, from my own recent interactions with Banyule councillors, there's some renewed energy and vigour on the Banyule side too about improving the whole Darebin Creek.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Are there any further speakers? As there are no further speakers, I'm going to put that to the vote. Councillors, all those in favour? That's supported unanimously. Thank you. Next item for the agenda, on the agenda, councillors, item number 7.6, Thornbury Park Estate application for a heritage overlay, proposed planning scheme amendment C191.
Should I make that statement?
Would you like to say? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I'd just like to reiterate what I said earlier. Councillors, I wish to have it noted in the minutes of this meeting that whilst I own property in the subject area of this proposed planning scheme amendment, I do so in common with approximately 1,000 property owners, and I've formed the view that my interest does not exceed that of the interests held by other residents, ratepayers and electors.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Councillors, do I have a motion or any questions? First of all, actually, do we have questions to the officers? There are none. Do we have a motion, councillors? Councillor McCarthy?
I move the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rennie. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to our officers for putting together this report. This report and the recommendation that councillors can see arises from a notice of motion that I brought to the chamber in the last term of council, and particularly responds to the ongoing community concern, specifically in relation to the site known as 33 Comus Grove, which is, of course, a significant and historic site, both the building and also the land surrounding it. But the significance is also in relation to the surrounding precinct, which is referred to in the report as the Thornbury Park Estate. I think it's fair to say that a lot of residents, and this is in my ward, the Southwest Ward, a lot of residents who live in Thornbury Park Estate don't actually know that they live in Thornbury Park Estate, because that is a term which was part of the subdivision that occurred in 1911. And of course, as councillors would be aware, this particular area is quite unique, and in fact it's been commented on ABC Radio, it's quite unique for the fact that it has a high level of intact interwar housing, and some of that housing in fact directly relates to the state housing schemes operated by the State Bank and other agencies, which I know some councillors, Councillor Lawrence and I've spoken about this in the past, quite unique in terms of the industrial and worker history of this city and of the northern suburbs as well. So we have both architecturally heritage here, but we also have social history, cultural history, and a history of who lived here and why they lived here, and the jobs and the lifestyles that they led. What is interesting is that we are seeing the risk of the loss of some properties in this area. We are also seeing the threat that hangs over the head, or rather over the building, I should say, of 33 Comus Grove. And that building is much loved, much revered, sits at the top of the hill, and really represents the foundation piece for that subdivision. It's interesting to talk about this in terms of protecting 20th century heritage, when we think about the context of the traditional and Indigenous heritage that we have been celebrating tonight as well. But what we do know is that if we do not see heritage controls in place in relation to both 33 Comus Grove and the Thornbury Park Estate, we will see the further loss of a lot of Californian bungalows and other interwar buildings and properties. This does not prevent them from being renovated. It does not, in fact, ultimately prevent them, in some cases, from even being demolished, but it does require a planning permit if approved, and that allows that moment, breath, some consideration of the values, and hopefully an opportunity to influence things in the best direction. So this is a request directly to the Planning Minister, and I really hope he supports us to go to that next stage.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak to the
No, thank you, Mayor Messina. I'm happy to reserve my right.
Do we have any further speakers?
I think we can put that straight to the vote.
All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, the next item for the agenda is 7.7, Heidelberg Corridor Planning Project. Do we have any questions to the officers? As there are no questions, do we have a motion? Councillor Dimitriadis?
Thank you, Mayor. I have an alternative motion.
Can I just confirm that that is your alternative motion?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hannan. Would you like to speak to the alternate motion?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So Heidelberg Road is the boundary between City of Yarra and Darebin, currently with historical industrial zoning. In recent years, we have seen significant developments in the City of Yarra, such as at the old paper mills in Alphington. This development in Yarra has brought much angst in many of our communities, particularly along Heidelberg Road. I've been contacted by numerous residents concerned with the lack of consultation in regards to the future of this corridor, as well as maximum heights and issues of changing the historic industrial zoning. The amendments I put forward today allow genuine consultations with the communities of Alphington, Fairfield, Northcote and Westgarth on the future of this corridor, and explicitly asks questions on the topics the community has expressed great concerns with, such as rezoning, height limits not being mandatory, and potentially allowing buildings up to 8 stories to be built along Heidelberg Road. I look forward in hearing from the community in regards to the corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dimitriadis. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to speak in support of the motion. Just to speak about the general intent behind both the proposal and the motion, I just wanted to emphasise the starting point of where we're at now, based on the very good advice of our council staff, is that there is no specific design controls currently in place. So there's no certainty as of now of what kind of or what height of developments could be in place. So it's important to read carefully what is proposed. What is proposed to actually apply a height limit. There is none to put a height limit in. And other things such as setbacks, heritage controls, to protect the amenity and heritage of the area. And the rezoning proposal is quite a deliberate one to enable a slightly wider range of jobs. I think this is a really important point for Darebin. If we look to our future, we want people to work locally. We want to create jobs and employment locally. And the intention here is to make this an employment, or continue this as an employment precinct, particularly with higher skilled people. But of course there needs to be a balance with good amenity. And it's also important to note this is the start of consultation. So this is not a done deal. This is putting something out there to start the conversation. Planning is incredibly complex and very legal field, and it really requires specialist input from experts. There's been a lot of work put into this. The intent is very clear.
10 seconds.
And I welcome people, all stakeholders, residents, businesses, other people who use the area to give their feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Hannan. Do we have any further speakers? Councillors, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Dimitriadis and Councillor Hannan. Item number 7.8. Draft Revenue and Rating Plan 2021-2025. I'll ask officers to address the desk. And councillors, are there any questions to the officers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Member Senator. I just have one pretty straightforward and simple question. Given that we're dealing with a 10-year plan, just so that we put it into perspective, in understanding that even though it is a 10-year plan, we're not locking ourselves into 10 years, but that the plan can be renewed each year. Is that the case or not? Just if we could have an explanation about that.
Thanks for the question. Sorry, a bit loud. Through you, Mayor. With the rating and revenue plan, this is a 4-year plan, but the same principle applies. We aren't locked into it. We can review it annually. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Greco.
I'm happy to move the recommended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councillor Williams. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just very quickly, just to put this into context. This is an important piece of work. It's a new piece of work that Council is required to do under the new Local Government Act, where we're required to have a revenue and rating plan that covers a period of 10 years in order to ensure that councils have more a longer sight in terms of how they plan to raise revenue and also how to expend that revenue over a longer period of time. As I said, the Act requires this, and this is what we're doing. So what it does is essentially, and I would encourage, obviously, councillors, I assume, all the councillors have read it, but I would encourage other, even members of the audience, to read this plan, because it actually gives you a really good understanding of how council works, how the rating system works, how council raises revenue, and how council has to plan for expenditure, whether council needs to borrow money and how much it can borrow, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and we've seen this misinformation given out in some local media quarters about council borrowing money and why does it borrow money, and is the council going to go bust as a result of borrowing money and things. So I think it's a really instructive piece of work, and I commend the officers for putting down all this information, because it's especially for first-time councillors, or even councillors like myself that have been on council for 12 years, there's always something to learn in there when you read these documents. Also, I think it's important to note that this particular document is it's integrated with other documents, like it's integrated with the 20-year vision. It's also integrated to the 4-year council plan, and it's also obviously takes into account next year's proposed budget. So what it does is sort of wraps around all those other documents in terms of indicating and mapping out the future revenue streams, and also what the possible proposed capital works program will be in the future. And as we know, as a council like ours, where we have aged infrastructure, it's important that we have a plan like this where we can map out how we can actually improve our infrastructure and rebuild some of our depleted infrastructure. So I commend the work that's been done, and what this particular motion actually does, it puts the plan out for consultation with the community, and for the community to provide us feedback, which then will come back to the council for formal endorsement.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak?
I'm happy to reserve my rights to speak, if that's all right.
Are there any further speakers?
I'm happy to put it to vote.
All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, the next item for the report to consider is 7.9, Declaration of Special Charge Solar Saver Residential Batch 7. Wait for the officers to approach the desk. Councillors, do we have any questions to the officers? As there are no questions, councillors, do I have a motion? Moved by Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to state your motion first before we have a second?
Move the officer's recommendation, Mayor.
You're willing, Councillor Williams? Yeah. So moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor McCarthy, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. And I just would note, just making sure that the whole motion is there on screen.
Do we have a page 2? And 3?
Yeah, it's just to be aware that councillors that more for the gallery, I should say, that the motion is many pages. It is listed in the agenda, and this is obviously, as councillors would be aware, one of our standard items that we do deal with, and we are very pleased, of course, to pass these motions, because they do enable us to deliver the terrific Solar Saver program. And I'm pleased just to note as well that there is a commitment in the draft council budget for the continuation of the Solar Saver program in the next 12 months, which is great to see. This particular item refers to the special charge scheme, which we are required to advertise and go through a statutory process for, and in this case the full value of the special charge scheme is some $74,000. In relation to this particular charge scheme, councillors will recall when we last considered this item, this enables obviously the installation of solar for a number of households in our city. It also delivers the net benefit, of course, for Darebin as a city to increase and continue to increase the contribution of solar to our local energy system, and to continue to move us, as we already have achieved. We've already achieved the doubling of solar in Darebin, not just through Solar Saver but through advocacy, but it continues to particularly support our most vulnerable households, and those households are those who we know are facing energy poverty. So it is a practical program, one which I know enjoys strong council support and strong community interest, and I'm pleased to see that we're continuing on with this one tonight.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Williams.
I'd just like to say a big thank you to the officers who put this together, because I think this is a wonderful program and system that we have here at council. It actually takes away a lot of that stress, particularly for residents, elderly residents. It's like trying to find a home loan. There's nothing worse than trying to find out your different solar panels, what energy, what the watts and this, and also then do you trust the tradies that come to your house? Council's done all of that. It makes it so easy, so simple, and all the resident has to do is pay back the amount of money that council puts up front initially. So it's no of any loss to council. If anything, it's an extra tenfold benefit to our residents, and overall it helps the environment.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillors, I put that to the vote. All those in favour? That item's carried unanimously. Councillors, we have next item for agenda is 7.1, residential parking permit policy. Do we have any questions to the officers? As there are no questions, do I have a motion? Councillor Dimitriadis.
Thank you, Mayor. I have an amendment, just a slight change to the wording.
Happy to second.
I just want to note that it is the same one that was circulated before we had to ask for a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Today I move a small amendment on the officer's recommendation to bring this report back to council after the council plan consultation is currently going ahead. I will keep this speech short, as we heard only last month about the importance of this report. I thank officers for their hard work and quick turnaround on this report after the 22nd of March notice of motion. While this is an important topic for many in our municipality, particularly in areas like the South East Ward, I think it is important to bring the issue back to council for further consideration once a council plan consultation has been completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dimitriadis. Do you have a question?
I have a clarification. Just I think there's
something.
Could be an error where it says consultation. I think it should say before the council plan is completed. Is that right?
No, it's to come back to council after the consultation.
So after.
Yep.
I'm happy to reserve, thanks.
Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you. I'm also pleased to see this, if this is successful, come back to us after the council plan process is completed. Partly also because, as the report notes, and as councillors would have noted on page 943 of the agenda, the actual review, or the cost to review the residential parking permit policy, is an item which council needs to budget for. And that budgeting process is actually what, in line with the commitment in the council plan to undertake such a review, it's important that we actually understand the context that we're in right now. If council adopts the council plan with that item allowing for that review to occur, it's also adopting the council budget, and the council budget has a proposed spend of $55,000 above operational budgets. The report notes that that is the cost to undertake that review. These things actually cost money to undertake, and so I think it's important for councillors to realise that if we're going to do this and we're going to spend ratepayers' money on reviewing the permit system, and I'm pleased to support such a review, we want to spend that money wisely so that we get the optimum community outcome. And I think that's really important. We do not want to spend the sum of $55,000 without being clear on what the community's expectation is about a review. So that's what comes first, and then if approved, then we would obviously proceed with that review process. I'll end it there, but happy to also support Councillor Dimitriadis' alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Rennie?
Happy to go to the vote.
I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That item's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, the next report we have for consideration is item number 711, Governance Report, April 2021. I invite Ms Craven to the table. Before we ask any questions, Ms Craven would like to make a statement.
Thank you, Mayor. So just noting that in the report it indicated that councillors were to sign their declaration for the completion of their mandatory training at this actual meeting, but we've actually been able to complete that before the meeting, so there is no need to do that this evening. I also want to note an additional point 8 that is being added to the officer recommendation, that we hold a special council meeting on Monday the 10th of May at 6 p.m. to deal with a report relating to the council plan and the financial plan.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do we have any questions? Councillors, do I have a motion?
I just had a question.
Go, Tanya. Yeah, Councillor Greco, apologies.
Just in relation to that last point that's been added, could we just get a bit more context about why it's a special council meeting and why it's been held?
Absolutely. Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Greco. So the special council meeting is to deal with the dilemmas that we need to put to the deliberative panel around the council plan and the financial plan, and we'd like to take the opportunity to actually brief councillors next week on it and then bring it to the chamber the following week.
Just a supplementary question. Just the first part of my question, why is it a special meeting and we could not make it an ordinary meeting?
Through the Mayor, Councillor, just to respond to that question, we've been doing some additional work with the deliberative panel and we wanted to undertake that work and that engagement with the deliberative panel, which included a meeting of councillors with the panel at the weekend. We wanted to undertake that work before we provided the dilemmas to council for consideration, so we delayed bringing it to the council meeting tonight. But the deliberative panel has 2 meetings in May, one on the 2nd, where it will further consider the community vision, and one on the 23rd, which is the day before the next council meeting. So we will require a council decision for the dilemmas for the panel for that date. The next opportunity would be the 10th of May, which is the same day as a planning committee, where councils will be assembled for that purpose at 6:30. So a special meeting is called for that purpose.
Thank you. Councillor
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I have a further question. This is a change to our typical meeting agenda. I think from my point of view it's a very welcome change, but I note that it will be a difference for the community who's used to seeing the agenda presented in a particular way, and I wonder if you might be able to outline what this change actually entails and what it means for the council agenda and the way in which the council meeting is conducted.
Through the Mayor, in terms of the agenda process, it will be the same process as standard, the difference being it's not part of the usual meeting cycle, so it won't be held at the usual 4th Monday of the month. That being said, it will be on the same day as a planning committee, so the agenda would be available prior to.
Sorry, my apologies. I wasn't asking that question in relation to point 8. I was asking the question more generally in relation to this governance item generally coming to us and the fact that a number of reports that have been separated on the agenda are now being rolled into this item, and I think that's the difference of note for the community that might be worth explaining.
Thank you for the clarification, Councillor Rennie. So just to explain quite broadly, the governance report has been established to bring together a number of different governance matters, some of which are largely administrative, but to group them together so that it's easier for the community to find them in the one place, whereas otherwise typically the community need to look for individual reports where it may be more difficult to find. So it's in line with Council's public transparency policy and also our governance rules to work to improve the governance processes.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor McCarthy.
I'm happy to move the recommendation with the additional point 8 as listed.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder to the... Seconded by Councillor Rennie. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor McCarthy?
Thank you. Look, I'm really pleased that Councillor Rennie asked the question that she did, because for me that's actually, whilst I also welcome this report and the range of items that are covered here, which many of which councillors would know are covered often in individual reports that come to this chamber. So this seems like an efficient way of bringing these things together. It is really important in making that move, and this is a move that seeks to consolidate a range of governance items, which often are standing items, that it's clear to the community where they can find this information. And for me, that's actually really important. So, I welcome any efforts that council can make to ensure that is clear, because we do know that some community members take great interest in these sorts of matters. They are interested in what is held in these individual reports, and these individual reports consolidated into one report may in fact make it easier for people to find these things, but they need to know to look at the governance report to see these range of matters. So that's why I really support Councillor Rennie's question and also welcome the response. I would just say that there are a couple of instrumental items here, and councillors would be aware. We do need to hold a hearing of submissions committee. We clearly also need to hold a special council meeting as well. But one other thing which I think is worth noting here, and I found it interesting to read, was the responses to questions that were taken on notice during public question time, and to see both the questions and the answers provided in this report, but also correspondence that's been provided, follow-up correspondence. One that I noted in relation to Clements Reserve I found of interest because that's an item that's obviously been on the council agenda in the past. So welcome the breadth of information that's in this report and the depth of information, but really do support that notion that we must make it clear to our engaged stakeholders, and in fact all stakeholders who are interested, that this is where they'll find that information from this point on in the agenda, and it seems like a very efficient way, and less paper hopefully as well going forward, and obviously making it easier hopefully for community members to find governance related information in the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Rennie.
Thank you. Very briefly, I'd just like to thank the officers for taking the initiative to present this information in this way. I think that the community will appreciate and benefit from seeing the questions that have been taken on notice reported back with such clarity and having a particular place in the agenda. And likewise, I think having a number of governance matters brought together, such as information about hearings of submissions and assemblies of councillors and all of those things. I acknowledge that often these are the matters that get left to the very end of our council agenda, and then they get kind of waved through because we're exhausted, and I think that this is a way of elevating governance, and first and foremost we are here to ensure the good governance of our municipality, and elevating governance in this way I think is pretty critical, and I actually think our community will be the better off for it.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? I'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? That item is carried unanimously. Councillors, the next item is item 8, consideration and response to petitions and notices of motions. Being there are no response to consider, we'll now move into the consideration of notice of motions. Councillors, item 9, notice of motions, item number 9.1, Kramer Street West.
Thank you, Member Senator. I'd like to move the notice of motion as it appears on the screen.
I just want to confirm that is correct, your notice of motion, Councillor Greco?
Yes, it is.
Do I have a seconder for Councillor Greco's notice of motion? Seconded by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Member Senator. I'll just make a few points in relation to this notice of motion. And first of all, I'd just like to start by thanking the many submitters that have come here tonight, and also the many emails that we have received as councillors, and just like to thank the community's participation in this process. As can be seen with all the emails and all the submissions and all the questions, I think everybody's on the same page about wanting traffic calming measures for that particular precinct. There's no doubt about that. Everybody wants to see action taken in regards to calming the traffic and the thoroughfare, and making it much more accessible for pedestrians, cyclists, and the residents of the local area. So let's just put that right up front, and that's what what we're trying to do here. Look, I couldn't help not drawing parallels with when we discussed the Bell Street LXRA proposal. It's a very similar situation where we have a proposal by the state government in that particular case, and where local residents have been put out. Yes, we understand that we want the the boom gates to be removed and all that sort of stuff, but particular residents are feeling the pinch and are feeling left out and feeling not listened. This is a similar situation, councillors. We have a project which we've been working really hard on for the last 2 years, and when it's come to the crunch moment, particularly the Kramer Street residents, and I met with them together with Councillor Newton, and there were over 20 of them in a street meeting early on a morning at 9 o'clock, and many of them were concerned about what is actually being proposed for their particular street. They're not concerned about removing any traffic calming measures for their particular street. They were concerned about the pinch points that are being proposed, and what is being suggested by the residents that we could find more effective measures to put in place in Kramer Street. And also, if I may say, if I go to the substance of my motion is saying let's move ahead with the project, particularly with the James Street side of the project, and let's make that happen immediately. And in the meantime, let's listen, let's consult, let's hear what the residents are saying about Kramer Street and what it means for them. Because as we were talking about the Bell Street situation, location is important, and so is location here. It's utmost importance, and we don't want to put one part of the community up against the other part of the community. So what the motion does is basically gives us a little bit of breathing space while work is already starts, so that we can consider other options for Kramer Street.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
Can I reserve my rights to speak, please?
Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence.
Mayor Messina, can I ask a question? Will I pass that?
No. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I speak to oppose this motion. We can't underestimate the importance of making our streets safer for children, walkers, cyclists, the elderly and all people. This project is shovel ready. Money has been allocated in the budget, it's approved and it's ready to go after 2 years of extensive consultation. If this project gets delayed, what that means is that other projects will be set back further. We know that this project, as the question is asked earlier, will lead to less traffic on Kramer Street and it will slow traffic down. This project was approved by all 9 councils last June after 18 months of wider consultation with the community. That included online surveys, reviewing feedback, defining the vision, further engagement, reporting the results and council endorsement over 18 months. Council has endorsed this project. The community has been expecting it to go ahead as it's been approved and it's ready to be built. We know that it will make it easier for children, women and older people to walk or get a bike to go to school, to Preston Market to the east or Elizabeth Street on the west. I drove to Preston Market on Saturday and spent 20 minutes looking for parking. I usually ride and I can lock my bike up straight away. The easier we make it for people to ride bikes and cycle in the local areas, the better. We know that making it easier for people to ride bikes improves the amount of women who don't feel as scared to get on a bike. For example, on Heidelberg Road, the amount of women riding has increased from 16% to 30% with the bike lane that's been put there recently.
No comments from the gallery, please.
I just want to talk about some of the things that I've heard from people. People are genuinely worried about accidents and they're worried about their kids getting to school safely. This is not something that any of us can take lightly. I have met with the residents and I understand their concerns. This project has been approved, it's shovel ready. We can't have something that will suit 100% of people, but this increases safety for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Hannan.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to speak against this motion for similar reasons to Councillor Newton. Not so much speaking against the motion, but speaking in favour of a plan that has been in place for some time with extensive community development and is ready to go. As I said in my previous comments, planning is inherently complex, especially traffic management, and there's never one perfect solution. However, we do rely on the expert advice of traffic engineers and our professional staff here on council. It's not as if there is one perfect silver bullet which you can just take out the pinch points and put in something else and it'll be fine. There is a lot of considerations for the different types of users and the specific location, which have been carefully considered. There's been a lot of analysis on this one. Our professional staff are giving us the advice that this is the best solution to meet their project objectives, and it's one we should go with. I also recall a previous discussion, a previous meeting around speed humps, roundabouts and pedestrian crossings, Fairfield. In that case, there was a similar issue in that we were trying to protect the safety of kids crossing for a school, and I was very sympathetic to that. In this case, I know the area well from dropping my own kids off there for activities. There's parks there, there's schools there in the surrounding area. So I think we need to respect the consultation and the arguments we've heard on both sides. There are vocal voices on both sides. Many people concerned with safety and are asking us to go ahead with what we've already approved. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers, councillors? Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mayor Messina. I appreciate I can't ask a question, so I'll put an amendment to put my question. The amendment I'd like to put is to add to point 2 that council investigates no right turn signage in the mornings for Cromer Street.
Is that acceptable to Councillor Greco?
Could we have the actual word?
Can we have that? So can I ask you to scribe that or email it to... just one moment. Did you catch those words? Right. Would you like to repeat that, Councillor Lawrence, please? Point 2.
Adding on a sentence to point 2, and council investigates no right turns in the mornings to Cromer Street.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
I'll just make a point of clarification. Mayor Messina, I believe that already that there is a no right turn into Cromer Street in that particular area, so it would be a bit redundant to do that.
I'm going to ask for some clarification.
Having had my question answered, I'll remove my amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Very clever. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate that there's a high level of interest in relation to this matter. I just want to restate the impact that, and I'm speaking against the motion and speaking in favour of council proceeding with the process that it has undergone, and I suppose keeping the faith with residents who have engaged in the process, which in fact goes back, I think Councillor Newton referred to 2 years. I want to just go to what actually will happen if this motion is adopted. There is currently money in the current council budget which is dedicated to something happening. If that doesn't happen in this financial year, that money does not stay sitting there in the council budget ready for an alternative. It actually you have to go through an entire process, if you were to look at other options, an entire process of investigating other options, then going through an internal budget bid process, assessing the spend on those options. If other options prove to be more expensive, then you actually have a situation where they may or may not get up. The money that has been allocated, and all 9 councillors in the last term voted for this, the money that has been allocated towards this project is there to be spent. It has gone through the proper process. So if this motion tonight was to succeed, there will be a delay in any of the specific remedies that are seeking to make this section of Cromer Street safer for vulnerable pedestrians, vulnerable cyclists, vulnerable road users. There will be a delay, not in a matter of months, but at least in a year, more than likely much longer, because you need to then go through that process of consultation and engagement and effectively run what we have already done. So the question I have for councillors to consider is, are the children who are zoned for West Preston Primary and the children and young people who are zoned for Coburg High School, how long do they need to wait until they have safe passage to be able to ride to school?
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers?
Thank you. I've gone to and from regarding this issue and debated. I've actually had to sit down and speak with officers as I wanted to hear it from their mouth prior coming to today's meeting. I've asked the question regarding safety and at what high priority is this as a safety, and they said it wasn't a huge, it was a priority but not a huge safety priority, and they didn't see it as a major concern regarding children. They didn't see it as a also major concern regarding money if there were going to be other areas of looking apart from pinch point, whether it was going to be a raised cross-section or speed humps or looking. And the other question I asked was about timeline and timeframes, and they said they could possibly come back with to us by the end of the year. Now, to me, that gave me a lot more clarity and I felt a bit more comfortable in making my decision. And then it came to the point was the other side of it is that the decision that was made 2 years ago, that was 2 years ago with a different council. We have a different council today and we are looking at pinch points. Now, if I had a pinch point in the front of my house, I don't think I'd be happy because I'd be losing a car spot. I live up in the Oak Hill estate area and we've had pinch points taken out and they've been removed and are being replaced by speed humps because of cars, buses that have actually gone over the pinch points and they have disrespected the pinch point altogether. So I found that we need to start looking at maybe other treatments in this area, and as I said, if it wasn't going to impact safety, it wasn't going to impact financially, and it certainly wasn't going to go to another area of that money being spent into another section of this particular road. Money will still always be put aside for this particular project. So I feel comfortable going forward in voting for the amendment.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Lawrence, did you speak? You spoke.
I moved an amendment. I've moved an amendment.
You've got an amendment to move.
That I withdrew. I haven't spoken to the substantive.
Okay. What? Okay. Would you like to speak or move an amendment? I'm confused.
I'm just speaking to the substantive.
Yep. Okay.
Look, this is, you know, a reality that this is a short street, but it is a street that, you know, faces a busy end of Cromer Street, and you know, there's no doubt they deserve a traffic calming and some, you know, change there. Unfortunately, there seems to be differing views about the pinch point application, but there's no differing views on other things such as the pop-up park. So I'm sort of happy, point one, and some advice we have been given is that, you know, this project should be able to start now, given it was signed off a while ago, and it's still in last year's, you know, or the current year's budget money. So I'm hoping, and I didn't get to ask questions, so I'm hoping that that's true, that the pop-up park can start immediately, and also the assertion is that the pop-up park was meant to start by March. In regards to signage, well, it has been done before in Collingwood and Fitzroy a long time. You know, you can try it, see how it works. In terms of the pinch points, I'm coming to vote for the removal of them in the end, but I'm well aware that the alternatives are either raised roundabouts or speed humps. And speed humps can vary from very cheap to expensive. So I'm waiting for this with the anticipation that things within the current budget can occur, and if the community comes back with higher things, and that's going to be an obligation on us to try and fund those higher things. So it is a risk that's been highlighted, but it's one, you know, I'd be making a commitment to.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Do we have any further speakers? Councillor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. I'll be voting against this motion, and for me it sets or continues quite an alarming precedent of councillors believing that they have the expertise to know better than our transport and traffic engineers how to address road safety issues in our municipality. And quite frankly, I find that incredibly concerning because I think it actually opens us to all kinds of exposures in the event that we redesign traffic safety measures and accidents occur. If an accident lands in the coroner's court and it comes out that this council redesigned the traffic safety measures in a street where such an accident occurs.
A point of order, Mayor Messina. I think Councillor Rennie...
Please note what item of the point of order.
I think Councillor Rennie is a misrepresentation of what this motion represents.
What item on the...
I don't have it here in front of me. I seek the CEO's assistance in identifying point of order under misrepresentation.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, I don't think it's appropriate that I provide you with the point of order, but I'm happy to provide
It's
you
Mayor
with
Messina. It's Mayor Messina. Thank you.
But I am happy to provide you with the governance rules, Councillor Greco.
It could be a point of order under 54(1)(g) as an act of...
Please, that's not appropriate for you to answer that. Thank you. It's up to Councillor Greco to note what item number it refers to.
The point of order would be under two parts, 10.1, 10.1(1)(b). It's is irrelevant to the matter under consideration. Also, it's 10.11(g) H is a misleading or false statement.
I'll accept that, not the first one, but certainly the second one. So can you please withdraw or retract that statement, please, Councillor Rennie?
I'm not sure. I seek clarification as to the statement that I'm made. I'm not sure which the misleading statement was. So if Councillor Greco could say what he felt was misleading, because I'm not certain.
Could you please address that, Councillor Greco?
Yeah, certainly. It's the statement that Councillor Rennie made that I think that is misleading, is in relation to how if we were to alter this motion, that it will be that we would create such a hazardous situation that could lead to very dangerous incidences in that particular area of Preston.
That's actually not what I heard. I actually heard a different statement.
Perhaps I could just keep going.
Just keep going. That was not exactly what I heard. Sorry. I'll allow the statement, but I'll
change chat.
I would like you to change perhaps the wording for the good faith of this chamber and the people that are listening in the gallery.
I'm no longer sure what I said, so why don't I proceed along a different line?
Thank you.
So we've already heard that most of the issues raised recently by residents were actually previously raised. These are not new issues. These came up in the initial round of consultation, and we decided unanimously at the time...
Point of order, Mayor Messina. The issue in relation to pinch points, as far as I'm aware of, have not come before us because they've only just been recently suggested in the when we voted for them last year. So there's no specific criticism of the pinch points.
So item number 10J, misleading statement. Can you? And I actually would ask you. I can't confirm if that is correct at this stage.
So I was repeating officer advice that was made earlier this evening when their exact words were, most issues raised recently were raised previously.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Thank you. So, there are very genuine road safety issues in this precinct. And as a parent who has recently been trying to ride with her son to the oval that the Preston Bull Ants use, to ride along Kramer Street with a child, I can attest
firsthand to the experience of trying to get a child on a bicycle safely there. These type of initiatives, the Streets for People initiative, should not be viewed in isolation as one intervention here or a different intervention there. They work because of the totality of interventions along the corridor, and it is irresponsible to intervene and get rid of some interventions whilst keeping others. It does not contribute to road safety, and I think we need to start to think, how serious are we about the safety
Messina,
of
just a
road
point
users?
of order, if I may.
Item number, Councillor Greco.
Yeah, just the false and misleading. It's not getting rid of, the motion is not suggesting that we get rid of traffic calming measures in totality. What the motion clearly says...
I'll accept that, yes. Councillor Rennie.
So I was not suggesting that we were seeking to get rid of those measures in totality. The point I was making is that you cannot pick and choose interventions.
Messina, point of order. Can you please make your ruling rather than getting Councillor Rennie to justify her comments one way or the other?
I ask you to withdraw the last sentence of your statement, and with all this interruption, I'm actually I'm lost the plot in terms of what your last statement was. There's too many interruptions. So can I ask, I'm going to put 15 seconds on the clock, and perhaps you can readdress it based on your last two sentences, please, Councillor Rennie.
Mayor Messina, I've actually found this incredibly disruptive to my speech, and I think it's been unnecessarily so. It's been, almost impossible to actually keep my line of thinking. And what I was saying is that you cannot view individual interventions on a street like this in isolation from others, and you cannot remove or add individual interventions without an impact being felt across the entire projects. So make no mistake, this motion undermines the integrity of the entire Streets for People project, and this is a project which in the past Council has supported unanimously.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Dimitriadis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a few comments supporting this motion by Councillor Greco. Firstly, in response to Councillor Rennie's claim that councillors believe they know more than any experts, that statement's been thrown around quite a lot, and I find it offensive. It's disrespectful, not only to us but also to experts. It's actually not about any expert opinion. It's about listening to the community and who live. They live the streets, they walk them, they drive them every single day, yet we aren't listening to the...
No comments from the gallery, please.
Yet we aren't listening to the community's concerns. Instead, we've got experts making statements that community aren't listened, and community isn't being listened to. So in regards to the pinch points, my understanding is that they weren't discussed in the council term. I understand the other items were discussed. Pinpoints wasn't something that came up, and this is another issue that has come up in the past where things just automatically come into motions, and we have to vote on something that wasn't discussed in the committee.
Point of order. That's a misleading or false statement. This was approved by the last council. That's
perhaps
1H.
Yeah, we've already addressed that actually is correct.
The pinch points specifically?
You might have to retract that.
Last June.
Yeah, you might have
okay, well, I wasn't there, so this is a new council term, so I'm happy to retract that. But my understanding is that these sort of statements, new ideas come in which haven't been consulted with the community, and then we get stuck in a situation where
Point of order, it's a misleading or false statement, 1H. There's been 2 years of consultation.
I don't know that the 2 years of consultation actually specifically spoke about pinch points.
Sorry, I'm making a point of order, 1H, a misleading or false statement. There's been consultation on this project from March 2019 until August 2020, and we voted on it in June 2020, so it's been extensive consultation.
I have to ask you to retract that statement, Councillor.
Sure, I'm happy to retract it. Like I said, I wasn't here in the last term, but what I am seeing is that the community is not being fully presented with certain aspects aspects in general, and then it comes to council and we have to make a decision on something the community is unaware of. So we get submissions, we get emails, we get a whole lot of complaints about certain issues that weren't discussed with them in the first place. And I think in terms
Point
of
of order,
Street,
that's a misleading or false statement that it wasn't discussed in the first place. There's been 18 months of consultation,
like I said,
extensive consultation with the community.
Hold it. Please just retract or any comments in relation to the past 2 years in terms of community consultation. We've addressed it 3 times now. Can you please not address that?
That's fine. I'm sorry. I'm happy to retract it, and I didn't address it. I said it's an issue that's been coming up while I've been in council, that certain things have been coming to us without community consultation. General statement. In terms of Kramer Street, I think we need
Point
to
of
listen
order,
to the community.
it's repeating, so it's 1F. It constitutes a tedious repetition of something already said.
Yeah. Okay, the clocks, we'll just end it there. Thank you. Councillors, are there any further speakers? I think Councillor, we've all spoken. That's correct. Councillors, let's put this notice of motion. You want to reply, sorry.
Councillors.
Just one moment. I just want to check Councillor Greco. We've gone to and fro, multiple interjections. We have an against. So I think he's actually...
You know, I just want to check that you can have right of reply on a notice of motion.
I think he's allowed it.
Mr. Mahan?
Right of reply on a notice of motion, I think that is allowed.
I think it's allowed.
Yep.
Certainly.
Councillor Greco.
Thank you. Look, councillors, I'm really flabbergasted hearing what I've heard. When we were talking about the Bell Street rail crossing, we were annoyed that the state government is not listening to local residents because it affects their location. We were jumping up and down about that. Here we are in relation to a project which has been initiated by council, and we're not listening to our local residents. That I find very hypocritical, councillors. And if we are to be consistent in relation to one project, I think we need to be consistent to a project which is of our own development. No one is saying that the Streets for People is going to be abandoned. We all want the Streets for People to work. And we all want it, and all the residents want it, both the Kramer Street residents and also the residents at the other end. And what this motion does, which has been carefully crafted, is to allow the project to continue in relation to the James Street end, in regards to the Pop-Up Park. That is to start immediately, whilst the other area, Kramer Street, gives us a little bit of breathing space to listen, hear, and find other more effective traffic calming measures that could actually achieve the same objective in a better way. And so, councillors, I would really urge you, let's listen. We were talking before, let's listen to our residents. This is a project that we have developed, and we are not listening to our residents, and particularly projects like this that affect location. It's utterly important that we hear the views of our residents and we don't ride roughshod over them. No one is saying, and I don't want to be misinterpreted in this way, no one is saying that we do away with Streets for People. It's got to be Streets for People. If it's going to be Streets for People, it's got to be Streets for all people in all streets, including Kramer Street.
Thank you. Councillors, we've heard from everybody. I'd like to put this notice of motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Williams, Councillor Demetriadis, Councillor Messina, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Greco. All those against? Councillor Hannan, Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Newton, Councillor Rennie. That item has been won. Thank you. Councillors, item number 10 is urgent business. I'm actually going to vacate the seat, and I'm going to ask Councillor Deputy Mayor Councillor Greco to take the seat. Thank you.
It's not an officer recommendation.
Could I seek leave of council to move a motion that we accept this as urgent business onto the agenda?
I'm chairing the meeting. Just give me a moment and we'll get that. Councillor Rennie. Okay, councillors, we're on to item number 10, which is urgent business. We have an urgent business item that is before us. Do I have a motion for us to accept this urgent business item? Councillor Rennie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I seek leave to present a motion that we accept this onto the agenda.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Lawrence. Do we have, Councillor Rennie, would you like to speak in relation to?
No need to speak.
No?
Thank you.
Okay. Those in favour of including this as an urgent item on tonight's business? Put your hand up. Okay, that's carried unanimously. I don't have to mention the names, it's carried unanimously. Okay, therefore we have a motion, an urgent motion that is there as read. Do we have an opportunity to ask questions? Okay, so it's moved by Mayor Messina, seconded by Councillor McCarthy. Is there an opportunity to ask questions?
No.
Are there any questions, councillors, in relation to this motion, urgent motion? If there are no questions, I'll ask Mayor Messina to to move the urgent motion.
Thank you. I have vacated the role of chair because of the importance of this matter in order to be a councillor who moves this motion as our local governance local law prohibits the mayor from moving or seconding the motion when in the chair. Changes to the Victorian Local Government Act 2020 required all councils to undertake a deliberative engagement process to develop a community vision which will guide the direction of council plans. We have established a deliberative panel to assist us with this work. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all the participants who have spent endless amount of hours undertaking this enormous task. I've put forward the following motion because I want to ensure that this panel, which has worked so hard on the draft vision, understands how much we value and appreciate their work. Accordingly, the first point of this motion is to acknowledge the excellent work by the panel that the panel has undertaken to date. I've also heard from the panel that they would like more time to complete the task of determining a community vision that the online process did not enable the fullest participation of all members of the panel. Accordingly, the second point of this motion is to ensure all future sessions will be in person. On the 8th of April, Council considered the panel's draft vision and made some changes in presenting this motion. Tonight, I want to clarify with the panel that the panel should consider these changes as suggestions. Point 3 of this motion makes this clear, and I hope I'll go a long way to reassuring the panel that we will recognise they are still working on the vision and that they should move forward with confidence and complete this work. I'm immensely excited about the wisdom and experience the panel brings to this task and look forward to the completed community vision. The draft vision will now be going under further consultation. With this motion makes it clear that the groups that are consulted at this point will be presented with the panel's original draft as well as suggestions from council. Furthermore, I have now spent some hours listening to the panel. I'm impressed with the depth of their thought and commitment to the process, and I want the panel to proceed with confidence, knowing that our council entrusts them with the role of completing the task. At the same time, we recognise that some voices in our community may have found it harder to be sufficiently heard in consultation and the deliberative process as a result of the imbalances in power and access related to issues such as migration experience, language and disability. In order to address this and achieve the highest possible levels of equity, we will look to find ways to ensure people from whom English is not their first language and have pathways to future participation in greater numbers. Accordingly, we will look at ways to increase participation as outlined in this motion. Importantly, we look forward to hearing back from the panel prior to their final vision coming to the council meeting in June. This motion sets the expectation and timelines for this to occur. As this is the first time council has been going through this process, we have much to learn. We embrace this more ambitious level of community engagement and expect to learn much from the final evaluation activity with panellists which will assist us to strengthen our practices in this area in future. Once again, I thank all members of the panel for their time and commitment and encourage all my colleagues to support this motion.
Thank you, Mayor Messina. Councillor McCarthy, as the seconder, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'd like to rise to second Councillor Messina's motion, and it's always refreshing to have the Mayor speak to an item that she feels personally engaged in and connected to, because it's not something that we always get to have the opportunity to. So I'm pleased that Councillor Messina has made that move this evening. And also that we hopefully have a way forward in relation to this matter. I want to speak specifically to the first point. Councillors that had the privilege, and I note it as a privilege, to spend time with the panel members on Saturday and hear directly from them. I just have to say it was an incredibly humbling experience to hear from individuals in our community, some of whom have had prior engagement with Darebin and our processes, but some who haven't. And in fact, for me, this motion and in fact the community engagement process more generally, and particularly the panel process, is a test for us as an organisation, as elected representatives, of the trust that we have in our community and that our community has in us. And it's that special relationship which is so precious but can so easily be undermined if it's not dealt with care and love and attention and seriousness. When you hear someone say that they don't feel that they've been heard, or they felt that they had spoken and their words were changed, you need to hear that clearly and you need to respond to that. So I'm asking all councillors to put aside their individual views in relation to the community vision, in relation to what words they like. That's not what this is about. This is about the community panel being able to develop a vision, to work together. We must support them to do that, and we must empower them. And this motion restores their role in the empower process, and that is absolutely critical if we are to restore trust and a future for these sorts of processes.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers, councillors? Councillor Rennie?
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Messina and Councillor McCarthy, or Mayor Messina and Councillor McCarthy have indicated on Saturday, we had the very great privilege of listening to members of the deliberative panel for a good 2 hours, and I was so impressed by the depth of their thinking, by the level of their commitment, and by the respect they showed for each other in the way in which they engaged with each other, despite the fact that that was the first time they'd met in person. They have been constrained by the online environment. They haven't had quite as much time as they would hope to have to complete their work. But in spite of this, they've come up with quite a remarkable draft vision. It is a draft, and I think this motion will give them the confidence to carry forward and complete that work, knowing the respect that we will accord the work that they come back to us with. But I was particularly struck by the diversity of views in the room and the way in which they challenged each other in quite a lovely and respectful way. They challenged each other when they thought they were being too verbose and carrying on for too long. They challenged each other on issues of importance around use of language, around the place of First Nations people in the vision. They had these conversations in a way which I think will add great value to the final outcome that they come up with. And in fact, we cannot ask more of them than that. They are 40 people. We as 9 often don't agree on things. And so, they are 40. They are less likely than us as 9 to find consensus on everything. But their engagement and the way in which they connected with each other, looked at the complexity of issues and pondered the meaning of words and chose things so deliberately, I think is an absolute credit to the work that they are undertaking, and I very much look forward to the work they'll continue to contribute to our Darebin vision.
Thank you. Any further councillors who would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Lawrence?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, through you. Deputy Mayor Greco, through you. I'd like to thank Mayor Messina for bringing this motion into the chamber. And I know it's a product of a great deal of listening that the Mayor's been involved with, and a very long process in terms of reflecting on how to strengthen the deliberative panel going forward. This is, of course, at the moment involving 39 residents from a variety of backgrounds, and is part of the overall 1,600 plus consultation that the council's conducted in terms of developing both the community vision, the community council plan and the council budget for that matter, with more community feedback coming on those soon. So, but this is the most important part because it's detailed work, and the commitment of the deliberative panel is such that you know, a great deal of them came again for a discussion on Saturday about how to further fine-tune and make the process better, and seem to have a great passion to make the community vision even better and stronger if they're given the time to be involved and to be heard. So I think this motion sets out a very strong process. It's one that is, you know, not foreign to the City of Darebin. The City of Darebin has the most community committees and the most amount of consultation that I know of in Metro Melbourne. But it's so important because this is about really hearing from everyone, involving these panel members and setting down a 20-year vision. So it's really important, the extra effort, and I really thank the Mayor for bringing this all together.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any further speakers in relation? Councillor Williams?
Just very quickly, I just want to say a big thank you to the panel, the deliberative panel that did come and meet with us on the weekend. It gave us a huge insight on their passion and their vision of what they would like to see. It gave us a real insight of the commitment that they've given to their platforms which have been Zoom in the past, and it just shows that they would like to do more face-to-face, and I have no doubt that in the future that they will come up with some wonderful collaborative outcome that will be benefit not only to themselves but I think for the whole community. So I definitely look forward to what actually comes out of this.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Dimitriadis.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to also say that it was wonderful to meet the members of the deliberative panel last weekend who attended the meeting, and also their commitment to Darebin was astonishing. So thank you for all your hard work. You've given us great insight into your visions and all the hard work that you've done. Various things stood out for me about what was said, particularly about the process so far. Firstly, the main concern was about that it was rushed and that they didn't have enough time for discussions about issues for the vision. There were also problems with our panel members working online, which is what we heard from some of the councillors. So this particular the motion that's being put up hopefully helps conquer those things by requesting face-to-face meetings for the next few meetings that the deliberative panel will have. I note that in addition, members of the panel raised concerns that they didn't discuss topics that they were passionate about because they were randomly put into groups, and the important topics that were missed were things like disability and economic development. So hopefully by having these face-to-face meetings, this can actually come into fruition. Other members raised issues about the lack of representations of First Nations people as well as multicultural people, and that the loudest voices were being heard. So this is why also in this motion, moving forward, there'll be an extra 10 members on the panel, and hopefully this will address some of these concerns. Importantly, it also came to our attention on the weekend that members of the panel were not adequately informed that the council has always been entitled under the Local Government Act, as well as our policy, our Darebin engagement policy, that we could change the statement. Under the term empower in Darebin's community engagement policy, it is well documented that Council's promise to the deliberative panel has been, and I quote from the policy, "We will implement what you decide or recommend, or we will provide reasons in Council..."
Your time's up.
Thank you. So I'd recommend that the policy is read, but I encourage the...
So your time's up.
Thank you. I support the change if that's what's best for the deliberative panel.
Yes, Councillor Hannah, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I'd like to express a general appreciation and how impressed I am with the panel and the process and the consultants who've run the process, echoing the statements of many of my fellow councillors. I'd just like to pick up on a couple of the comments that we've made in a general sense, that for any particular one, is that this is a new process and it's an inherently messy process. There is no process on the planet or in the history of the world which could bring together 40 people, no matter how representative they may be, how well-intentioned and hard-working and generous of spirit they may be, to put them in a room and come up with something as complex as a vision statement for a municipality for 20 years. Yeah. Many of the... So yes, we had a session. We were very lucky to be able to have a session with most of the panel. I really appreciated that. And of course, you know, in any process, any consultation process, any facilitation process, there's going to be differences of views, differences of, you know, on the content and the process. Let's just remember, it's inherently difficult. We started this in a COVID situation when we had to make quick decisions about how we're possibly going to meet, and found a way through that. Extra measures had to be taken to try to get in a good representation of people. These are not easy things, and I heard a lot of endorsement for the way that it's been run, for the facilitation that's happened. So no disrespect or criticism should be taken
your time's
in the
up.
process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll reiterate some of the sentiment that I've heard in the room, which is that I too was really impressed by the panel, who we met a lot of members from that group on Saturday. The thing that I hadn't really connected with as much in this chamber is how seriously they'd taken what Darebin might look like in 20 years. I just got the sense from so many of them that they had taken their time to really think about what will this city look like. They thought about it for themselves as they age in place. They thought about it for their kids. They thought about it for their grandkids. And I was actually also incredibly impressed at how deeply people thought about it, but also how they'd come together as a group on Zoom and through really challenging circumstances. I think that was the first or second time that they'd met in person. So I really wanted to say a big thank you to the panel. I agree. I think it was very diverse, and I think that, you know, you're never going to be able to get down to sort of one person out of 40 representing 1/40 of the community. Like, that's never going to be achievable. But I think what this does do is bring progressive views. It brings older people, younger people, and a very diverse group to come together and try to find a way forward for this. For me personally, my view is very clear that this has always been a community vision. This is something where we have given them the reins, and I'm very, very comfortable with handing over power to that group. That's something that I think is very important for the process. And as a councillor, I don't think that we should change their words at all. I think it's the community vision. I'm very clear on that. I also wanted to thank the consultants, Max Hardy and Chatterbox, particularly, who I think have done an incredible job. We've given them a really big remit to really go to different communities, different languages, all across the city to do the consultation. And I've been really impressed by how quickly they've done that and what a good job they've done. So I really want to say that publicly and clearly, how much they have my support.
Time's up, Councillor.
Time's up. And the last thing is, yeah, for us, it's really just about getting out of the way and letting the panel do their job and the consultants do their job.
Thank you, Councillor. I think all councillors have spoken, including the Mayor. Before I put the motion, I'd just like to take the opportunity also to make a statement, and I think I'm allowed to under the governance rules. The reason why I want to make a statement is that I wasn't present on Saturday, so I'd just like to say that I support the deliberation panel's work, and, you know, I thank them for the work, and also I welcome their engagement and also their critique. Because I think it's important to hear their critique and various views coming out of the panel. And just a final point that I'd like to make is that I want to thank the Mayor for bringing this motion before us tonight as an urgent motion, and in particular, and the dot point that refers to addressing the underrepresentation of people whose first language is not English, and increasing that representation by allowing 10 more people to be part of that panel process, which would then help to balance out the representation to make it more reflective of the multicultural community which Darebin is. Having said that, councillors, now it's time to put the motion. Those in favour of the motion, put your hands up. Councillors, that's a unanimous motion and it'll be noted as that. Thank you.
Councillors, thank you for supporting that urgent motion. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 11, consideration of reports considered confidential. There are none. Next, don't we have to address councillors' reports? Oh, okay, yes, sorry. Item 12, close of meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Close the streaming. Sorry, I'm too excited.